Welcome to Thriving Through, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the world of independent consulting and shows you exactly what you need to do to build a successful consulting practice. I'm AJ, I'm your host, and each week I dive deep into the real life stories of self-employed consultants who have transformed their expertise into thriving businesses. Now, this isn't about glossy success stories or overnight miracles. This is about the grit, the strategies, and the resilience it takes to build a consulting practice that is not only financially rewarding, but also personally fulfilling. From navigating the feast or famine cycle to landing dream clients, from managing the unique challenges of entrepreneurship to creating systems that support your business, I'm covering it all. Each episode features a candid conversation with consultants who've been where you are. We share their stories, their insights, and the hard-earned lessons that transform their business into a thriving practice. So whether you're just starting out, looking to level up as a consultant, or wanting to reignite your passion for consulting, this podcast is for you. It's your weekly dose of inspiration, insight, and strategies that will pump you up and motivate you for the rest of the week. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and get ready to learn, get inspired, and most importantly, to thrive. Welcome to this episode of the Thriving Through podcast. Today, my guest is Cheri Smith. Cheri, I'm going to throw it right over to you. Tell us your company name and a little bit about what you do.
It's wonderful to be with you today. My name is Cheri Smith. My company is Crevay, and we provide project support to companies, small and medium-sized businesses who want to execute better on their really big initiatives, the ones that they need to grow and thrive as a business.
Love that. And I want to comment on how clear that is. With a lot of consultants that I work with, they're not all that crystal clear on what specifically they offer. And you are very crystal clear on who you offer, who your ideal client is, and how you help them.
So it makes me happy it just makes me happy that you said that, because it's been a lot of work to get there.
It is a lot of work and a lot of iteration to get there. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes we pivot, and yes.
More than once.
Is the problem that a company is having that makes them want to come to you to hire you?
So usually it's an idea that they're ambitious. They may have grown very quickly to get where they're at, or they may have grown slowly. But they have an idea that they want to get to the next level. And, as a founder, I relate to the idea of, first you have to get your own mind and attitude and understanding to a place where you can execute on that. And then it's a whole other thing to bring the team along with you. And so, it might be a founder that wants to launch a new product or move into a new market or become more efficient or try something different. And those things are really hard to do. And so, if you hear someone saying things like, I have a great team, but I'm not sure we're up to this, or sometimes I'll hear people say, it seems like we're always trying to get caught up and we can never get ahead of the curve. Those are the kinds of things where, we can actually help, because there's a system, there's methodologies some of them unique to us, that will really help people who have those kinds of problems.
Okay. You've developed this unique focus on companies with 50 to 150 employees that have outgrown their project management systems, that have a big initiative, something they want to do, and they're not quite sure how to get there. How did you identify this specific niche?
Like I was kind of implying before, it's been a whole process. It started as me being just dissatisfied with some of the aspects of project management. I've been doing project management for a long time, and there's so much that I love about the practice and the standards, and am grateful for the things that I've learned in the people who have set these techniques. But I felt a little bit dissatisfied with the focus on how you manage versus the value that you're delivering. And so that was one thing that caused me to kind of break from, all right, what are the traditional ways, and how can we improve? What are the traditional ways of managing projects, and how can we improve that? And then the focus on the small to medium-sized businesses was just, as I've worked with people, and as I started looking at the content and the resources that are out there, it just became clear that there's this gap where if you're a small business, you're just, a handful of people, the coordination tends to be a little bit easier. If you're a big business, oftentimes you'll have a project management office, or some sort of established infrastructure that helps support projects. But there's this in-between space where there's not a lot of structure. You can't afford to have too much bureaucracy that slows you down. You need to retain the agility that is making you grow so fast. But you also need a little bit of structure so that you can keep your eye on the ball, that you have clarified what your goal is for your team, and you minimize coordination costs. So that's where we focus, and that's how I identified that.
Okay. And I noticed you say we. Do you have a team?
I have a team of various professionals that help me with marketing. So yes, that's just, I've kind of thought that in the back of my head as I've been growing this business, because I'm the only full-time person with Crevay, but I'm always team-oriented. That's how we get stuff done, is through teams, even if you have your own business. And I would assume that, or from what you've talked about before, AJ, you recognize the difficulty of operating independently. And I would assume that you have used, resources that are available to you to help fill some of the gaps, even when you are working by yourself.
Yes, now I do. But when I was running my own consulting business for many years, I had an assistant at first, but then I didn't really need him for the research part because it all went online. And I did not want to have anybody. I didn't want to manage anybody. So, and I know I held myself back because one of the challenges as self-employed consultants that we have is when we're trying to wear all the hats, we end up doing things that are sort of below our pay grade, to use a phrase. If you can hire somebody to do as good a job on something for a lot less money, do that, because that frees you up to focus on the revenue generating activities. And that's what I didn't see when I was consultant, and I know it limited my income, my revenue, because I was doing everything, including the little stuff. And sometimes that stuff that's below your pay grade, sometimes it's just more comfortable to do than to actually make a phone call.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that for sure.
Yeah.
Working with teams is hard, and that's one of the very first things in kind of orienting clients that we talk about. Is there's kind of three things from what you said that I believe are relevant from the way we approach it. So first, focusing on value. You talked about hiring someone who can do it better. If you're focused on what's the value of my time, what is the value of this activity towards my goal, and everybody's keeping their eye on the goal, that helps us to make those decisions more readily. So that's one thing that we really emphasize is focus on value. Another thing is the definition of the team. When we think of projects, we think of, okay, we're going to have this team go off and do something, and they're going to produce a result that's going to get us towards our business goal. But you can't be thinking of that team as a separate entity. You're really working with everybody in the organization to some extent, especially with these big initiatives, has some piece of it. And everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody has to understand what the goal is. And everybody has to be making the decisions that are within their purview towards that end on a consistent basis. And so defining your team as, when I say we, I'm talking about, people that I use for bookkeeping, or someone that I use for marketing, or someone that I use for sales. And we are a team. And as long as I've defined my goals and helped them understand what those are and stay oriented towards those goals and align the incentives along with those goals, then this team, which, it's just sometimes people who are working a few hours a week on my stuff, we all keep moving towards that same direction. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is just viewing your project as a system, and letting, not thinking of it as I'm doing stuff, but it's everything that goes into it. So it's that whole environment, the beliefs, the attitudes, of course, the processes and the systems, but looking how everything works together so that it, again, is all working towards that goal and achieving value.
Beliefs and attitudes, they get in the way of the project, but when you're working with a client, how do you identify their obstacles?
We're very purposeful about it. Like, we have a module at the very beginning that our first focus area is project thinking. And it's examining individual beliefs and attitudes and talking about the different ways that people think about projects. Because even, you say project or you say project management, and it means a whole host of different things to different people. And that's one of the difficulties that people face, is they're coming at it from slightly different angles. And so in this first module about project thinking, we have people examine and reflect on their beliefs and the beliefs of the people that they work with around projects and what they do and what is meant by a project. So being purposeful about that, and then also taking and saying, okay, here's the lens through which we are looking at it. So there's all these other valid ways, not getting tripped up about methodologies or different, certifications or anything like that, but saying this is how we're thinking of it. And as you go forward, there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to know what that is, and you have to be thinking about what it is so that you can get your team, if you're an executive, you can get your team lined up and all thinking in the same direction about projects and how they create value for your organization.
And you talked about modules, and that reminded me of, you talked about the playbook
Yes.
that you put together. Tell me, first of all, I want to applaud you, because you've developed a proprietary product. So you're not just a gun for hire. You have a proprietary product that your clients can buy from you. So I want to know, share what inspired your comprehensive approach to developing a playbook.
I mean, from the very beginning, I've known that I did not want to do traditional consulting because there are some limitations, and I'll divert a little bit here. I'll keep in mind your question about the playbook, but I'm curious what kinds of limitations you have run into as a consultant, because I've spent decades consulting, and I love helping clients, but I also felt very dissatisfied sometimes about the limitations that imposed. And I wondered if you'd run into the same thing.
The limitation I noticed, I was a market research consultant. So I would do projects, deliver the projects, had absolutely no control over what they did with those. And I knew that in a lot of cases, they were gathering dust in a credenza somewhere. That was back in the day when I actually set physical hard copy reports. And it ultimately was one of the key reasons that I chose to close my consulting business, because I didn't feel like I was making a big difference. I would put together a research report with really great insight to help them develop a product that was going to sell well. And probably 6, 7 times out of 10, they wouldn't do anything with it. It just got very frustrating. So that was the limitation for me, is I didn't have control over the implementation.
Yeah, I hear you. And I felt much of the same frustration. And so I've been in business for 2 years. My first year I did a traditional project management, kind of managing a project for someone else. And
I stop and clarify that a little bit before you go on.
Clarify
What, when you say traditional project management approach, so you came in and you were the leader of the project?
Yes. So very often when someone has a project, they'll hire an outside project manager who comes in, and it's the project manager's job to coordinate, to make sure that you have a plan, that you follow the plan, and you execute as prescribed. And that's very common. So that's what I had done. The project that I was working at the time was redesigning an internal intranet for an organization. And I mean, it was a great experience. The clients were wonderful, and the team was great. But, again, I felt those same limitations about what I could actually do, and what of the new processes and procedures that we put in place to help people with that project and ongoing operations, how much of that would stick. In fact, I know that after I left, a lot of the things that we had put in place kind of fizzled out, even though we had developed them in conjunction with the client. And so I left that experience. I knew I wanted to still work for myself. One of the things that I had decided was this idea that someone can come in from the outside and tell you how to run your business really doesn't make sense when you sit and think about it. And so it has to be a give and take. And I hit on the idea of value co-creation. And I ran across, I don't know where it originated first, but I ran across it in ITIL training, infrastructure technology. I don't know, ITIL, they don't use the it's just an acronym. And so in that, they define value co-creation as you working with a client, and you're both contributing to the value that you can create. And whether it's a service, whether it's a product, there's how the client uses the product, and their perspective and understanding and knowledge is as important as what you bring to the table. And I really liked that. I like the idea that you're both creating value, and it's the interaction that's really important. And so that's one of the things that drove me to say, okay, how can we interact with people? How can we teach people to manage their projects in a way that is sustainable once I walk away? And so that's what really drove the playbook, is how do we get people to, at the end of the day, they have to design their own project system. They have to set it up in a way that works for them. So how do we give them enough information and facilitate the right conversations so that they are organically developing a project capability that, of course, is going to change and adjust over time, but continues to meet their needs? And so that's what drove the playbook. And the other thing that drove it is this idea that I wanted to expand. I don't want to be just myself in the business long term. I think this is an idea that has legs, and want to be positioned to grow. So I've been thinking about this in terms of what is sustainable and repeatable, and what can I, grow to other people over time.
Let's talk a little bit about that vision.
Mhm.
Because you're 2 years into this, into being self-employed. You've done project management
Mhm.
forever, most of your career, but you're on your own for the last 2 years. Now you're pivoting to the playbook. You're already thinking long-term. You're already thinking scale. I want to scale this business. I don't just want it to be me. So tell me a little bit more about how that is influencing your day-to-day decisions, knowing where you want to be with this.
Well, I have to be willing to let go of things. And as much as I've managed stuff, I still have a hard time with that. A good example would be LinkedIn. For a long time, learning how to post to LinkedIn and getting comfortable with that and learning how to use the platform took me a long time. And it's only recently that I have realized I can't spend as much time on it as I have been. I need to turn that over to other people and let them do what they're good at. So reminding myself, again, keeping my eye on that vision. I don't want to be the one that's posting to LinkedIn. I know I can't do that if I'm going to get better at networking and get better at building business the other ways that are required. And so keeping my eye on that goal and having that vision and that intent, keeping that top of mind all the time is the thing that kind of makes me, oh yeah, I'm spending too much time on this. I need to hand it over to someone else.
I love it. I mean, it's really, you have a deeper purpose. Because
Yeah.
when you talked before, you said you were driven by more than revenue, and that you were looking, including possibly employment opportunities for family members, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is a deeper purpose that is helping you to make the decisions now that are going to help you, enable you to be able to do that down the line. And so many people don't have that deeper purpose. They don't, they especially in the early couple of years, they may be just focused on their deeper purpose is making money so that they can pay their bills. But tell me more about that, how important that deeper purpose is for you.
It's to go out on my own. It was because of that deeper purpose. Although I have to say, if I had understood how long it would take, all of the pivots that would be involved and all of the learning and all of the experimentation to start to figure out what it was I wanted to do, how I could help people, how to communicate that to people. I mean, all of that has taken a lot longer than I anticipated. And so, knowing that in retrospect, to do this to make money wouldn't make sense. Maybe long term. I mean, hopefully if I can scale it, of course the returns will be worth it. But as opposed to just having steady employment, financially, I would have been better off to stay with my job. So I kind of knew that when I left my other job. And there's a long pause here. Hopefully you can cut this out. that deeper purpose kind of always was there, in that I didn't, like in most of my jobs, I didn't feel like I really fit. There was always something about it that I was like, this doesn't quite fit. And so the drive to fit somewhere where my values and the way I wanted to approach things, and it worked with my life. I mean, all of those have kind of been at the back of my mind for a really long time. You said that not everybody has that purpose. I wonder sometimes if everybody has that purpose, but life teaches us that we can't honor that. And I see more and more recognition of how important that is, how it's different for everybody, and how being able to express that in some way is really, really important for everyone, even if it's, maybe not through your job, but, it might be that someone has, the reason they're making the money is for their greater purpose. Their greater purpose isn't necessarily tied up with their job. But I feel like now, with the various, with the rise in boutique consulting and content providers and all these different ways that you have to have a voice and to make a business, maybe there's more opportunity for people to do that.
Good point. And what just came to mind is that more and more we're able to listen. You had a little voice in your head that said, I don't fit here.
Yes.
And it just, and that voice probably got louder and louder for years, and probably for a lot of people still. For years, we were kind of told to suck it up, buttercup. I mean, like,
Yes.
you've got a job, be happy you've got a job. It's using your expertise, be happy with that. It doesn't really matter if it's a fit, it's a job. And having the freedom to say, no, this just doesn't fit. It's like a blister. And I've got to take that ill-fitting shoe off and find a shoe that fits, so to speak. I think maybe we have a little more freedom now to do that. I want to come back to something that you said that was so important, especially for self-employed consultants who are fairly early in the process, because a lot of consultants their goal is to make what they made in the corporate world, and they kind of think that maybe that's going to come pretty quickly. That it's a lot harder, and it took a lot longer, with a lot more pivots and iterations, and probably, 2 steps back, 1 step forward at times.
Absolutely.
If you had known that at the beginning, would you have still done this?
Yes, because all of that process that you described is learning things that I needed to learn. And some of them account for the reasons that I didn't fit. As I look back at some of the last positions I had, if I had known and had some of the skills that I've developed over the last 2 years, if I had the same knowledge and skills that I have now, I probably would have fit a little bit better in those jobs, but I couldn't have learned them there. And so, yeah, this is a hard process, and it's not just about the money. The return on investment has been, in terms of my belief in myself and my ability to say some of the things that I really wanted to say before and didn't know how. And I'm still learning that. But yeah, the payoff has been good overall, just not monetary the way I expected. And I don't know how you can know that going into it. And so I'm glad I didn't know how hard it would be, because I might have hesitated more, but like seeing how things have turned out overall, yeah, I would do it again.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's kind of a fine line. It's like when we're starting out, maybe we don't necessarily want to know exactly how hard it is, but we might want to be prepared to know that it is going to be hard, so we don't come in with an expectation that it's going to happen a lot faster than it does. You know,
That would be helpful. Absolutely. Yeah.
I saw a startling statistic that 80% of self-employed consultants are not in business. They fail by 2 years. And I wonder if how much of that is expectations. You know, but they're not where they thought they would be, and it's a lot harder than they thought. And maybe they're not looking outside to help get other resources to help them with it.
That could be. And I've wondered too if it's a lot of what you hear is people telling you, here's what you should do. If you just do this, you'll be successful. And no one really knows. And it can be very discouraging to try something and to try something and to try something again, especially when people are telling you, well, this should have worked. And so there's, one of the skills that I've developed is having grace for myself in not knowing and not being able to, make other people figure it out for me. It would be nice. But that's not how it works. And so you just have to keep trying it and keep trying it and keep trying it. And yeah, definitely having that mindset and that expectation would get rid of a lot of stress for sure.
As we start to wrap up, what advice would you give to other self-employed consultants?
Niche down and focus on the areas of value. It's not how much you know, it's what you can do for other people. But also expect other people to respect and honor your perspective. And the joy of doing any of this, one of the big things for me is just the relationships that I've developed. But they have to be mutually beneficial. And so, yeah, I'd say niche down, focus on the specific ways, what your superpowers are. And don't be afraid to say no to work that distracts you, and focus on communicating what the value is and understanding the value that you bring. And then just really facilitate some really great relationships, good teams, good business relationships.
Good advice. Niche down, focus on the value you deliver. It said, I thought, demand respect and don't be afraid of saying no to a client, potential client, where there isn't that respect, where there isn't that fit, that you don't have to take every project. And in fact, is it kind of safe to say when you detect somebody's going to be a difficult client at the beginning, it kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy that they become a difficult client?
Absolutely. Yeah. Trust your gut,
Yeah. Yeah. And then the final thing you talked about was building relationships and building teams and, building a tribe around you.
Yeah.
Of that. The difficult clients, I had a project once and I knew this man from his reputation, and the project sounded interesting, but I knew that it was going to be difficult working with him. So I doubled I always charge by the projects. So I doubled my project fee for that project and he agreed to it. And it turned out actually to be one of the most fulfilling projects that I had done. But I was so proud of myself for saying, I want the project and I know he's going to be a pill to work with. So I'm going to make this a lot more lucrative for me for the hassle of working with this difficult person.
Well, you set what your boundaries and your goals were, and it worked out.
It worked out, absolutely. And he turned out not to be the client from hell, which was also nice. Thank you. I have so enjoyed our conversation today. There are so many great nuggets, and I'm sure I will have you back on the show sometime in the future
I would
for
love that.
get some more nuggets. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
It was a pleasure talking with you. You do the same.
Thanks, Cheri.
Bye-bye.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Thriving Through. I hope today's conversation has given you not just inspiration, but practical, actionable insights that you can apply to your own consulting journey. Remember, building a thriving consulting practice isn't about following someone else's blueprint perfectly. It's about finding your own path and staying true to your vision while learning from those who've walked similar roads. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn and tag me. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps other independent consultants find our community and join this conversation. And don't forget to hit subscribe to ensure you never miss an episode. Each week, we'll bring you more honest conversations and practical strategies to help you build a consulting business that works for you. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and remember, you're not just surviving in consulting, you're thriving through it.